please rise and join us in the Pledge of Allegiance. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Thank you, and welcome to the Attleboro School Committee meeting of Monday, June 21st, 2021. This is your notice that this meeting is being electronically recorded. We're going to start tonight with our business agenda and specifically the superintendent's report. But before I turn it over to Superintendent Sawyer, the first issue he's going to address is the recent social media posts and comments regarding critical race theory in the Attleboro Public Schools. And before I turn it over to him, I just want to take this opportunity to make a few comments myself. And I'm actually doing something uncommon in that I actually wrote out some thoughts, so I apologize if I'm a bit lengthy. So naively, I think I was taken completely off guard by the sudden controversy that arose, the insinuation that Attleboro Public Schools are teaching critical race theory or that we are advocating it as part of the curriculum. This simply is not true and has not been true. You know, that being said, I'm certainly not blind to the national discussion that's happening right now about this issue and how it's being brought to school boards across the state and across the country. So perhaps it was not surprising that the issue has now arisen here. But, you know, I do feel that does not make this issue coming up here any less misplaced, given that this is not an issue the Attleboro Public Schools have taken on or this school committee has put forward in any way, at any time. Now, I'm cognizant of the moment in history that we're currently in and the discussion about race in this country. It's a national issue, a national discussion that it's crucial that we all have. I think our country has made tremendous strides and progress on this issue over generations, certainly in my lifetime and even in my children's lifetime. And so I reject any argument that refuses to acknowledge that reality or limit its impact. Still, that does not mean that we do not have a lot of work left to do as a nation and as a community and here in Attleboro. I hope that we can all acknowledge that reality regardless of how we may individually feel about critical race theory or about arguments for in its favor or against it. So I understand this is a hot button topic, and I understand that this is something that's on a lot of people's mind. But to be clear, critical race theory is not part of the Attleboro Public Schools curriculum. It has not been discussed, let alone endorsed by this body. And any allegation to the contrary is unequivocally false. Given that reality, I think any attempt to use the schools as a means to debate this issue is only serving to further create divisions, and it hampers our ability to achieve the mission of the Attleboro Public Schools. The mission of the Attleboro Public Schools is to develop and deliver relevant learning experiences that engage, challenge, and inspire all students to maximize the unique potential to improve our world. That mission statement was a result of many meetings between various stakeholders and is the perfect encapsulation of what we as a district are called upon to do. Given this discussion, I think it's appropriate to point out one specific component of that mission: the clear and intentional reference to all students. We have a sacred obligation to all students regardless of their sex, race, ethnicity, sexual identity, financial means, home life, or any of a myriad of other factors. We have an obligation to continue to reflect and find new and effective ways to reach these students who we may have been struggling to meet over the years. And there certainly are certain groups of students that is the case. For the purpose of this discussion, let me be clear. This includes the responsibility of the district to look at ways that we have failed to properly meet the needs of certain subsets of minority students, and ways we can change so that we can help them to receive the education and opportunity for growth to which they're entitled and to which they deserve. This is our mission, it's our obligation, and it's our duty. But to be clear, it's also our legal obligation, and we will continue to look for ways to ensure that we are fulfilling this responsibility as we go forward. Finally, while I think it's unnecessary, I want to be clear that given this duty and this responsibility does not mean that by fulfilling it, we are working to the detriment of other children and other students. Doing so would be against our mission and our obligation to all students and to ensure that every student is receiving the opportunities to which they're entitled. It also does not mean that we are endorsing critical race theory or teaching it as a theory to our students. To suggest otherwise without evidence does not make it true and only serves to sow further division. So let's focus on continuing to meet the needs of our students, enabling their growth and success, and not buy into the hysteria that simply is not relevant to the facts on the ground here at Attleboro Public Schools. So with that all said, I think I can get off my soapbox, and I'll turn it over to Superintendent Sawyer to speak for the administration.
Thank you, Chairman Withers. Quite frankly, there's not a lot to add to that, but I would like to go into a little bit of detail about a couple ideas that I think are important to put on the table as we try to tackle this difficult subject as a community. First and foremost, I'd like to reiterate what Chairman Withers has already said, which is that APS does not teach critical race theory. That is not an accurate statement, and it does not reflect the mission of the Attleboro Public Schools. The schools belong to the community, which means that they belong to everyone in the community. They're a shared space, and we as a community have to work together to create an environment in which kids can come and safely learn, and that means everyone, all students, and that also means that it has to be a place that we can share as a community from all political stripes. So it is not hard for us to take this stand, because it really doesn't make any sense as a school district for us to be endorsing any ideology. There's no place for ideology in a public school, right? It's a shared community institution, and it belongs to everyone regardless of personal beliefs, and everyone should be able to come here and preserve their beliefs and learn regardless of how you see the world. That said, there are some complicating factors that I think make a discussion difficult. The first I'd like to point out is that critical race theory is not a doctrine controlled by a recognized authority, right? It developed as a legal theory, it became popular in academic circles, and now you see a mainstream application of it. Therefore, the term itself does not have one defined meaning. It means different things to different people. And so sometimes it is difficult to have conversations about it because we're not all talking about the same thing in the same moment. And I really caution everyone to be careful, and we should clarify our terms about what we mean when we say things and when we make claims. I fear that, if one is on a witch hunt, lots of people will seem like witches. And there is no doubt that there are things that we do that, taken out of context, can be questioned, and we are happy to answer those questions and be transparent and accountable to the community. But it's really, really important that we do so in a way that is mindful of the fact that the subject that we're talking about is a complex one. For instance, I'll be upfront. The school district teaches history. Part of the history we teach is U.S. history. Part of the story of U.S. history includes slavery. Slavery is a topic that is taught in the Attleboro Public Schools in accordance with the frameworks that are set by the state. Does that make it untrue that we don't teach critical race theory? Because certainly slavery is something that is concerned with CRT. And so this is why we have to be very careful, because just because we teach about slavery doesn't mean we take a particular view on slavery. And so we could take that example and apply it in multiple other fields in which there are things that are going on that if you want to look at them a certain way, you can certainly find fault, but that doesn't mean that that's an accurate picture of what's actually happening. And I think that that's exacerbated by the fact that, again, the term itself doesn't have a strict meaning to everyone, and different people are using it differently. So I think we have to be very careful about how we talk about things. The second one is a belief that I saw expressed online, that our activities around diversity, equity, and inclusion, referred to as DEI, are somehow a Trojan horse for CRT. And I would start by saying I understand where that concern comes from. I think anyone with a news feed has read stories about specific things that have happened in other places that would be a concern to anybody, or at least I would think so. So I understand not knowing what we've been doing might lead one to ask questions. But I want to be very clear that from my perspective and the perspective of the administration, DEI and CRT are two different things. Now, in the hands of some, they can be synonymous, but they are not in and of themselves synonymous. And I think it's important that we make a distinction. To be clear, the way we think about DEI is that DEI is centered on fostering a respect for differences, ensuring that as an organization we operate fairly, and that we make sure that everyone who belongs to the organization feels like it is their organization, that they have a sense of belonging to that organization. That is at its core what DEI is supposed to be and what we mean by the term when we use it. I don't know who would object to these goals. And so the problem is not one with the concept of DEI. I think where there are concerns about DEI, it's about how it is actually practiced in some instances. And I'm here to tell you that we take pride in the work that we've done in this area. We believe that it is for the benefit of our students, that our employees are able to have conversations around the issues around diversity, equity, and inclusion, because the world has changed pretty significantly in the last 2 years, and to navigate that new landscape is a challenge for all of us, I think, in the Attleboro Public Schools. And we need to be able to do our work as an employer to help our employees to be ready to meet the challenges that they face. I'd also like to echo what Chairman Withers said, which is that this is at the core of our mission, right? The word all is in many ways the most important word in our mission statement. We are here to serve all students, and by any measure, we are not succeeding in reaching every last one. And the inconvenient truth is that if you listen to students, if you listen to families, there are people who we are not doing as well of serving their needs as others. And so we need to be receptive to that message. We need to be willing to listen to that and willing to do hard thinking about what we can do to change that, because we are here for everyone. And so I understand that, to the degree that in some places DEI means an experience that is influenced by CRT, to that degree, I can be sensitive to those concerns. But to the degree that an objection to EI is really an attempt to silence the voices of underrepresented populations in our community, the school administration itself wants to take a stand that we want to hear what our employees and students say about their experience in the schools and be responsive to that message, regardless of how difficult that is. The third point I'd like to make about this discussion is a distinction between compulsory beliefs and topics of inquiry, right? As a school district, we teach how to think, not what to think, right? Our mission is to develop relevant learning experiences. The more divorced from the reality of their existence students' educational experiences, the less interested they are in it. We have been working for years now to help teachers to make learning relevant to students by connecting with their own experiences. As a result of that, of course, we talk about the issues of our day. And as Chairman Withers talked about, it's pretty obvious that issues around race and equity and other concerns that people have around social justice are issues that students interact with, encounter, and hear a lot about and want to learn more about. And we have an educational mission to treat these topics like a subject, something to be studied, something to be learned about. And that is going to happen in classrooms, and it should happen in classrooms. What should not happen in classrooms is telling students how to think about these things, right? The truth speaks for itself. We should try our best to portray these things as objectively as possible, and our staff and our students should be allowed to draw their own conclusions about how to feel about these things. That's not the job of the school district. But it is not going to be the case that we believe that we should avoid these topics because students want and need to have an opportunity to talk about these things and explore these things in an educational setting. The other thing that I think we have to acknowledge is that we're a large district. There are almost 700 people who interact directly with students, right? That's a lot of people to have a strong control over everything they say and do over the course of an entire day. I'm very proud that our dedicated and talented staff do an excellent job of navigating the fault lines of how to conduct themselves with our students. For the most part, we don't deal much with complaints about things that people are saying and activities that they're asking students to engage in. That said, anytime you're talking about 700 people, there are certainly opportunities for people to be on the wrong side of the line, and or have a moment in which they make a mistake, divulge a little bit too much about their own personal beliefs, get too passionate about a subject, and make students feel like there's a right answer in terms of how to feel about these things. That's a real problem in any school system, and certainly before this became the issue of the day, over my 25-year career, there have certainly been moments where we've had to deal with incidences where something happened that we agree with the concern, that we have to do a better job of keeping that out of the classroom. That's a real thing. That's an everyday concern. And I just would encourage that where parents see things happening that they're concerned about, they need to reach out to the educators and speak to them. And where they don't get good answers to those things, they would bring those concerns to the administration. And when those things come to us, we look into them, and where we see that people haven't gotten it quite right. And by the way, politically, this goes in both directions. We have a very large staff, and as such, they are very politically diverse ones. And sometimes complaints can go in either direction politically. Some people feel like, things that are said or materials that cover can go either have a liberal or a conservative bent. And our expectation is that our educators are going to keep that out of the classroom. That's the expectation. But it's also the expectation that we're going to make learning relevant, as I've already talked about. And, we know that relationships are what drive a positive educational experience. When you ask kids about the best part of their time in a school, they'll almost always start talking about a particular relationship they had with a teacher or a paraprofessional or some other adult in the building, right? Those relationships are what make the difference in an educational setting. And you can't have a relationship with a robot, right? You have relationships with real people, living, breathing people who have feelings, thoughts, see the world a certain way. And so it's tricky to maintain that line where you keep your own beliefs out of the classroom, but still admit to being a person and having them. And so I hope that we will continue to foster an environment in which teachers feel like they can take risks and do their best to stay on the right side of the line, and that when they make a mistake, there is a safe way to correct that mistake so that we can continue to prosper and grow, and not create a chilling effect or to use the term of the day, a cancel culture in which one mistake and that we're going to ruin your career. So there's no doubt that no matter what we say in this setting, there's still going to be people out there who do what they do. And I would just encourage people that if they feel like there's something to be concerned about, that they raise that concern. I'll just close by saying that I believe schools they play an important role in protecting our democratic society. But America's marketplace of ideas should remain free and open. We should not create an environment in which students are not allowed to consider and talk about what the issues are. There's too much of closing off the debate in this country as it is. And, from my viewpoint, the threat in this moment is ultimately what Mr. Withers talked about, which is really the politicization of our schools, right? We need to keep the politics out. We need to keep the focus on learning. We believe we're doing our part, and we certainly welcome anyone who wants to help and support in that work. I appreciate your consideration. At this time, I'd like to turn it over to my colleagues in the Central Office Administration to give some year-end reports. We'll start with Ms. Regan for teaching and learning.
Thank you, Superintendent Sawyer. Despite COVID this year, we were able to accelerate technology in all of our classrooms. Teachers and students have become significantly more comfortable with the use of the Google Suite, and they are also using different other applications on their Chromebooks so that they'll be able to support their teaching and learning. The next thing I'd like to talk about is, I think most of us know, we created a virtual school this year. In the fall, we had 1,200 students. In the spring, we had about 800. We recognize that this was challenging for many students, and it was a positive experience for others. And this is one of the reasons why that we'll continue to have this conversation about opening a virtual school later in the agenda. COVID also this year prompted us to move to an online registration system. And so that system created space for families to enroll their students online. They're able to upload documents, and it streamlined the process significantly. And then looking ahead to next year, I know we already spoke about this at our last meeting, but we have identified our instructional focus areas for next year, and we're ready to act swiftly and target those areas specifically. We'll be beginning right away this summer. We have over 300 students enrolled in our summer programs starting in early July, and we'll continue to really intensely focus on those areas in the fall. So in closing, I know that this year was a challenge for everyone, and I want to take a moment to sincerely thank all of our students, our families, our teachers, and all of our staff for all of the support that they provided to everyone as we transitioned into new learning environments throughout the entire year. So thank you so much, and at this point I'd like to turn it over to Ms. Medeiros.
Good evening. Let me start with, for those families who receive in-district... He's all set?
You got to project, Yvonne.
Okay. Good evening. So just for families who receive in-district special education services, progress reports were published to Aspen today. If you didn't receive the email from me, please check your junk, clutter, spam boxes for that email. It gives you directions. The progress reports are published in the parent portal as well as the student portal for those families who've struggled to sign into the parent portal. The other piece is for families who, students who receive ESY services, those will begin on July 6th. Letters with transportation, classroom staff, all of that went out last Thursday. If you have not received those by the end of the week, please reach out to either myself or Teresa Silver, our ESY coordinator, regarding that information. If your student is, this is the first time that they're receiving ESY, and you just signed the IEP, or you just notified us that you do want ESY, please be patient with us. We're trying to get transportation set up for your child, or we have to kind of move staff around a little bit to accommodate for any extra students. So Teresa's working on that as fast as she can, and she'll get that information out to you. We are also, in addition to our ELC families that we always run an evaluation team over the summer, we are running an evaluation team over the summer for K-12 students. Those are individualized. The individual evaluator will contact the family to schedule that at one of our school sites based on your availability as well as their availability, and they'll be reaching out to you regarding that. And then just as we move forward, we've spent since January, continuing through the summer into the next fall, we've been training our staff, our K-5 inclusion teachers, our LAP teachers at the middle school, our language-based teachers, the LEAP program at elementary up through 5th grade in Orton-Gillingham. It's a systematic phonics-based program. For those students, we have a core group of students who really need that intensive support with specialized instruction. So we're going to continue that training as new staff comes on. But we've pretty much trained, I'd say, about 95% of the staff in that cohort of staff who've been identified. Staff who've been implementing it with students. The data has shown some great success for them, and staff feedback on the training has been really positive, that it's been very helpful for them as well. So like Ms. Regan, I just want to particularly thank all families and staff and certainly students, but I really want to thank the special ed families in the district and the community who've really plugged away with us through some challenging times over the last 15 months, and this year in particular, who've worked with us, at times being the special educator or the therapist or the paraprofessional, and really collaborated with us through these challenging times. I want to thank our general educators who've kind of worked through when we've come to them and said a student needs to come, when we were in the hybrid mode, they need to be here 4 days a week, and they've kind of adjusted their classrooms to make that happen for them, and providing their curriculum and supporting them through that. I want to thank our school-based administrators and acknowledge they're kind of plugging away with us, making sure that kids were having those inclusive opportunities, giving them as many services as we could, and just working with us and scheduling that. And then I just want to publicly acknowledge the work of our special education staff, our support staff, our paraprofessionals, who've really stepped up their dedication, their professionalism this year in particular. We've certainly had bumps along the way, but their continued support and dedication to the students with disabilities in the community has just been incredible to watch as they've worked through that in their own personal challenges with their students and their families and all of that. So I really wanted to thank them and acknowledge them for that. So thank you. And I'll turn it over to Ms. Singer.
Thank you. Good evening. Just a few updates from the Human Resources Office. Certainly this year, the pandemic made us rethink how we process things, and we're able to shift on the fly. Thankfully, in 2019, we had implemented a electronic HR system, so we were a little more easily able to transition this year with our hiring and onboarding processes. We were able to successfully hire and onboard 99 staff for this school year. Those were not new staff, they were just overall total staff. We were able to do that successfully and all virtually. When I started here, it was evident that our hiring practices and protocols needed to be improved. We have done a lot of work this year in successfully creating processes that are objective, transparent, unbiased, and I think that we still have a lot of work to do in that regard, but we have made significant improvement this year. One of the other things I'd like to highlight, negotiations, collective bargaining is difficult in any year. This year, doing that successfully with 7 unions, all virtual, was a feat in and of itself, as well as successfully bargaining, reopening, and AVA remote teaching. So I just want to thank the school committee, the administration, our union leaders and staff who helped to make those negotiations successful this year, and doing things that are in the best interest of our students. So thank you to everybody for that. As we look forward to next year, we will continue to digitalize a lot of our processes, taking this opportunity when we move into a new building. We have a lot of paper files in HR. We have to keep employee records for 50 years after the person separates from the district, so you can imagine we have a lot of files, and they take up a lot of space. So next year, we will be digitalizing all of those, as well as moving the rest of our hard copy processes to an electronic version, as well as continuing the great work of our HR council in refining and revising our hiring of our staff.